My name is Monk Rowe. We are filming for the Hamilton College Jazz Archive in Tarrytown, and quite pleased to have Ed Polcer, cornetist and one-man vanguard to keep jazz and swing alive in this country.
Thank you.
I shouldn't say one man, I
No.
suppose, because there's other people out there.
There are many.
Many doing it, but it seems to be quite a passion of yours.
Yes, I've always had that passion to go beyond just the playing and I don't like the word preservation, but the perpetuation of this great music, and I think I enjoy the promoting of it and the band leading as much as I do the playing. So yes.
You were born in the very hottest part, perhaps, of the swing era.
Right.
When you were born, so I don't know. Maybe that had something to do with it.
Well, I don't know. I was born in 1937, so by the time I began listening to music, you know, as a youngster, my father was a trumpet player in a polka band, so he had no connection with jazz, but my uncle played with Ben Burney and traveled to Europe, so I had a jazz influence in the family. So I think by the mid-40s, I mean, I was already listening to records that my uncle would be sending over, so and that was a resurgence. Well, it was, I guess you still had Swing Street going in the 40s. I somehow got interested in the swing rather than the bebop that was coming in. So yes, I started in the 40s listening.
Right. Yeah. The bebop at the time was a little more challenging for the listener, kind of abandon the dance end of things. Did they have any effect on your listening, do you suppose?
Well, I don't know. I guess I didn't listen too much to it because I really enjoyed the swing, and I think even going when we got into high school, we used to have noontime dances in high school. Every 5 days a week, the student council would charge 2 cents admission, and with that money that they'd collect every day, once a week we'd go out and buy records. And of course, at that time there was still Tommy Dorsey's Boogie Woogie and Benny Goodman and a few others. So in addition to the pop singers in the early 50s, I always liked to, since I was president of student council, I'd go out and buy some jazz records. And kids were dancing every noontime in the gym. It was incredible. It would last a half an hour, you know, during noontime. So I enjoyed, I guess what I was saying, I enjoyed the dancing part of it and the swing. And I think I shied away a little bit from the bebop, where the beat got a little bit more intricate and demanded more of the audience. And so I just got hooked on the interaction of the dancing and the people.
That's pretty interesting that the high school kids would be doing that much dancing. Nowadays, it seems like touching each other.
Well, that was the end of that era. It was 1956 when I was in college, when Bill Haley came in with Rock Around the Clock, and that was really a jitterbug tune. In fact, I think Cliff Lehman, Eddie Condon's drummer, was the drummer on that album, believe it or not.
No kidding.
Well, if you think of it, Rock Around the Clock, it was just, you know, it was just a swinging thing. But from there on, I don't know what the point was.
We were talking about the kids dancing.
Why they would dance. We did touch dance at that time in the 50s. I mean, I was in high school from 50 through 54, and it was wonderful. It was only later on, maybe getting into almost the 60s, where the separate dancing came in.
I want to come back to that Rock Around the Clock
in
a bit. But you started out on like xylophone or a mallet type instrument? Yeah,
basically, I was already young for my year in school. I started school, I think it was 4 1/2, and the teachers one of the teachers said, "You don't, after first grade, you really don't have to stay in second grade. You were pretty." I was pretty smart, and since I was already young for the age, another teacher came to my folks and said, "Instead of skipping him into 3rd grade, why don't we give him some outside interest to take up his time and things." And I couldn't, it was too young to play the trumpet. My father played the trumpet because my second set of front teeth weren't firm. And we were not rich enough to buy a piano, so my father went out and bought a xylophone, and I learned how to play xylophone before the piano. I still play vibes occasionally, but not on a professional level. Yeah. But I do think it was important also, because I think it's important that it's helpful for musicians to play an instrument where they can visualize the notes. I mean, when you see a chord, you know, people always ask what goes through your mind when you're playing. Not much, but in a way, I can almost picture those notes, having played visually.
Mm-hmm.
So until my second set of front teeth came in and were firmed up, I played xylophone. My sister sang. She was 4 years old. I was 7 years old. We were appearing in church minstrel shows and benefits and all kinds of stuff, talent contests.
Uh-huh.
So we got started early. I loved the applause right from the
all
start.
Right. So you were learning to accompany also on the xylophone?
I guess in a way, yeah. Accompanied if you can picture a 4-year-old standing on a milk crate, because to get up to the level of the microphone singing The Things We Did Last Summer, I mean, this is like 1944 or so, in a show. I mean, you know, if a 4-year-old girl singing The Things We Did Last Summer.
Too bad we don't have it on video. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
But was it in your mind, in your father's mind, that you were going to play the trumpet when you were old enough?
Yeah, I think it just became a natural thing. I mean, he played in a polka band. He had come over from Austria-Hungary, so he's really first generation American. And every Sunday during the summer months, I mean, he would be playing with a polka band at picnics and stuff, and I would sit alongside him and play second and third trumpet, you know, in the polka band. I don't think it was anybody's intent that I would get into music full time. You know, even then it was economically a struggle kind of a thing to consider that. But I think they always wanted music as a part of my life, and we always had music around the house.
Yeah. Was it? Did they play polka music in the house on records, or were there
Not
some
really,
other
not
kinds?
too much of it. No, my father would bring home a whole smattering of their trumpet players, Harry James, you know, the things that he was doing, and trumpet players in general.
Yeah. When you were sitting by him in the polka bands, was it written music?
Yes, it was all written.
Okay.
A lot of triple tonguing. You know,
Yeah.
it's very similar to really two-beat jazz. In fact, it's one of the things that I noticed when I play in Germany. I think one of the reasons that my theory on one of the reasons that Germans love this red-hot jazz, and they really love traditional jazz, it's very similar to polka. I mean, and if you go out to the West Coast and hear the Turk Murphy offshoots, the 50 or so bands that are out there, it's banjo and tuba, and it's two-beat. And you can polka to that whole thing. And I think it's why a lot of the older people do like this two-beat music. It's just they can walk to it. They walk on 1 and 3 as opposed to clapping on 2 and 4.
That's a great point.
I think there's quite a bit of validity in it. It makes it easy for some people to dance to 1 and 3. They can walk, they can parade, they can carry their umbrellas like New Orleans.
Right.
So anyway.
That's quite a scene.
So, you know, Ken Poplawski, who I work with a lot, also played polka band out in Cleveland, Ohio area. He got he cut his chops, or got going with that fast clarinet playing from playing polkas.
Difficult
That's
stuff.
what got him into it anyway, you know.
Serves you well, I think, when you technique-wise, at least. Yeah.
Yeah.
You went to Princeton.
Right.
What was your intention when you went to college?
Well, first off, I was good in math and physics in high school. My father was a warper in a textile mill, and his top salary was $90 a week. And for me to get a scholarship to Princeton, which I did, it was based on need. It was an honor, and also since I was good in math and physics, it was the design of my advisors and my folks that I would major in engineering, which is what I did. I spent 4 years majoring in engineering, got out, and within 6 years had pretty much given up most of the engineering background because it really wasn't me. But it was a thing to do. You know, it was a lot of hard work.
Yeah. There was read an interesting anecdote of yours about when you went to Princeton, you wanted to get in on the jazz scene.
Oh, how I was discovered?
Yes.
How I pushed to be discovered.
Yes.
It was like storybook. I mean, I didn't know Princeton and the Ivy League tradition and anything like that. I mean, I was never caught up. I never thought I'd go to an Ivy League school. We couldn't afford it. So it was never a thing. All I knew is when I was a kid, Dick Kazmaier played football and was All-American, and that was Princeton. And every Saturday, when I was in high school, Ted Husing, radio disc jockey, had a thing called, well, he had Ted Husing's bandstand on WNEW or one of the WINS radio. And for an hour, every Saturday morning, he'd feature Dixieland or traditional jazz. And every once in a while, he would feature Stan Rubin and his Tarrytown Five. Stan was a class of 1955 at Princeton. I was a class of 58. And by the time I got this scholarship and decided to go to Princeton, I said, I'd love to work with Stan Rubin. He was still there. He was a senior when I was a freshman. So it was freshman week. I was in my dorm. I opened the window up, turned on, we called them hi-fis in those days, and was playing a Dixieland jazz thing, and playing very hot, saying, somebody's going to hear me. And the first time I tried this, wasn't doing it for more than about a half an hour, and someone going to knock on the door. It wasn't Stan Rubin, but it was one of his competitors, Dennis Brady, who had the Nassau Jazz Band. And within that, it took that long for him to ask me to become his cornet player. Stan Rubin heard us. Stan Rubin booked us in Carnegie Hall along with his band. He had the Nassau Jazz Band play a couple of tunes because we were his discovery. And Stan would hire all the greats, I mean, you know, of the traditional era, Max Kaminsky, Buck Clayton, people like that. And they'd each do a set and would finish off with Stan Rubin and his Tarrytown Five. So, and then the next year, Stan went to play at Grace Kelly's wedding, and his regular trumpet player wanted to get paid more money for the job and refused to go. So Stan called me and said, "Do you want to go?" And that was actually the summer before that. Stan booked us on a Holland America Line ship where we went to Europe. We played on the student ship and came back. And, you know, so I had a tour of Europe after my freshman year of college. So I was welcomed into the jazz community very nicely. I had all the ups and none of the downs at this point. You know.
Yeah. Were your tastes changing at all as you went along? Let's say you were, by the time you graduated, you were in your early 20s.
Right.
Your taste pretty much stayed with the traditional jazz at that time?
Well, it paid my way through school, so I knew it had an economic thing. And Dixieland or New York swing, Eddie Condon, had a resurgence in the 50s. And so I stayed with that because it was very popular at all the colleges. And since it was still popular for me, as soon as I graduated college, I still gravitated to the Condon kind of guys. I sat in, played, subbed at Condon's a couple of times. Most of my gigs were, I don't like the word traditional, but I guess it's so long ago that people call it traditional now. But it was really New York swing. I mean, when it wasn't two-beat jazz, it was straight ahead swing. I mean, eventually, I'd work with all kinds of players: Teddy Wilson, Bobby Hackett, Joe Venuti. It was a good run of really swing music, and then Benny Goodman eventually, Hackett recommended me to him, so I played with Goodman for nearly a year. That was later on.
Yeah.
My tastes, I gravitated from early listening to Wild Bill Davison with the Condon band, but then I got to like Bobby Hackett, and of course I got to know Bobby Hackett because we played together quite often at some of the things I promoted in Jersey. And people like Buck Clayton. I guess my hero, who I gravitated toward most, was Ruby Braff, and sort of that middle swing, semi-modern but still good, solid swing. And that's where I gravitated, and that's where I still prefer to be, in that kind of pocket there.
You must have occasion where you try to explain the differences, what there are between New Orleans Dixieland, Chicago jazz, and New York swing, as you called it. Can you explain it to me?
Well, I'm telling you, how much tape do you have here? It would take quite a while. I mean, again, it's the critics that put the handles on. A player goes and plays, right? I consider the music I'm playing right now current. I'm playing music of today. For me, it's music of today. It's the music that I hear. It's like a composer or a painter. He can paint the way he feels. But I mean, traditional, real New Orleans was a lot of ensemble playing. There was very not, aside from Louis Armstrong, who grew out of that with solos, it was almost entirely ensemble playing. So when he went and influenced the fellows in Chicago, the Eddie Condon, the Benny Goodmans, they heard him, they heard his band, which had ensemble playing as well as solo. So what you call the Chicago style, where the band takes a chorus up front with an ensemble, a fairly close-knit ensemble, of course, and then each guy gets a chance to play a solo. Then you have a ride-out chorus or two where one is a little tighter and one is freewheeling. It's kind of the Chicago style. This is being very simplistic. Yeah. So Condon comes to New York, and it becomes kind of the New York style. Okay, it's a New York style of jazz, which is basically, Condon's New York thing was basically the Chicago style. But then you know, and you have ragtime, the ragtime piano player, the real two-beat. Then you've got the California banjo tuba based on Turk Murphy. I mean, you have all these offshoots that they become regionalized, and then you have swing, then you have mainstream, then you have bebop, and I mean, then straight ahead. What is straight ahead jazz? Tell me that one. Everybody who's playing jazz is playing straight ahead jazz. So I'm saying, critics have put these handles on, and they tend to pigeonhole the players. Oh, he's a traditionalist. Oh, he's this. You know, players that I know just want to. Oh, that's here's right. The band on this occasion. Now you just settle in. If I'm with a modern tenor player and a guitar player, I'm going to sound much different than when I'm playing with a banjo and a tuba. So, right. So who am I? What style am I? But it's tough to really to describe these things. Anyway, that was a capsulized description.
That's a pretty good answer. When it came down to making a living, when you were a young man, you were going to take a crack at being a full-time musician.
Oh yeah, this came after I worked for a couple of years in engineering and purchasing. Yes. Yeah. I was my midlife crisis. I'd say. A lot of very fortunate things happened to me at that time. I guess I was in my late 30s, and my first marriage, which was very good for several years, sort of petered out as I got more and more involved in music and less involved with a business career and a success thing, which I think my ex-wife expected me to do. In all fairness to her, she married a Princeton grad and probably thought I would put away childish things like playing jazz, but that didn't happen. And so at the time our marriage was breaking up, I met my present wife, who has been a constant reinforcing my career. She graduated college and majored in speech pathology, but ended up singing with a band also. So I met her on a gig. I was subbing for the regular trumpet player. And so since then, I've had this strength behind me to get into music. I mean, what I'm saying is this massive move to give up my day job and get into music wasn't done alone. It was done with a lot of help. My ex-partner, Ed Balaban, who I had been working with, when I quit my day job, he put me on a partial salary to go out and book his band, Balaban and Cats. Just at that very time, Benny Goodman called me and said, "Hey, Ed, this is Benny." I said, "Who's this?" "Benny." "Benny?" He's Benny Goodman. He said, "Can you make a rehearsal next week?" I said, "Well, you don't even know how I play." He said, "Well, Bobby Hackett just recommended you to me." He said, "If it's good enough for Bobby, it's good enough for me." So I show up at a rehearsal with Benny Goodman. This is all happening with like about 1 year time, where I've quit my day job, my marriage is coming to an end, I've met the future wife, and I see that possibly I have economically a way of making it as a full-time musician. Balaban ends up being my partner at Eddie Condon's, and I eventually buy into the club and become manager and part owner. I work with Benny Goodman, and I'm getting fame within certain parameters. And so becoming a full-time musician, even in the it was the mid-1970s this happened. So I'm out of school now 15 years by the time this happened. In the 60s, it would have been a disaster to get into music full-time, playing the music that I loved. It was rock had taken over completely. And there were maybe 6 clubs in all of New York City that featured jazz of any kind. Wow. It was going on. I was promoting stuff in New Jersey at the time. So that was the transition into music full time. Because I don't know if that was what you had intended me to say, but
yeah, that a certain number of things happened to come together that allowed you to do that.
Right.
And when we talk about rock and roll, you said that the 60s was absolutely the worst time. And wasn't there, was that the time where you said something about you went back to Princeton and you realized that?
Well, within 2 years after graduating, by 1960, I was invited back to play at one of the clubs for one of the football weekends. And when I was there, as late as 1958, there might have been, on a party weekend, on a football weekend, 8 jazz bands from New York, because Princeton, 60 miles, 50 miles from New York, was very, and Princeton had always been a jazz school, a great rich heritage and history of having jazz music played there. So there'd be eight or so clubs having jazz bands. I went back the next year and we were the only jazz band on the campus. Everything was rock. Bill Haley turned it around. When it was my beginning of my junior year, when at midnight everybody on campus they got together and said, we're going to open our windows up, and at midnight Rock Around the Clock was played all over they call it the Rock Around the Clock Riot at Princeton. Everybody, must have been near exam weekend or something, and it was an excuse to go out and party. But it was a signal, kind of a signal of what was happening. And by the time all those kids who were in high school when that was popular now are in college, so rock had taken over. But again, it was the interaction, it was the dancing that did it. It was not they didn't listen, they didn't care that much for the words. It was they could dance to it. Mm-hmm. And jazz had the main thrust of jazz had gone into bebop in a much more sophisticated form of playing. It's great music, but it really lost the public.
Uh-huh. Pushed them towards rock almost.
Yeah. I can't fault it because in art, I mean, art takes different patterns. I mean, when you compare a realist painting with a Jackson Pollock, for instance, you don't even know if you're not even using the same guides. You know,
right.
It's a different ball game.
It's interesting when you listen to the early rock that, as we said before, it's Rock Around the Clock is just almost
it's a jitterbug.
It's a swing blues, right?
I mean, it's the same tempo as Count Basie's 1 O'Clock Jump, and it's a blues.
Yeah.
But they used the words rock. The word rock came in. I mean, rock around the Christmas tree, I mean, everything.
Yeah.
They used that word. All the pop artists, you know.
When you listen to some of the early Chuck Berry, for instance,
right,
you almost hear this very interesting conflict because some of the band is still swinging, and Chuck is like playing straight eighth notes on his guitar, and it's like adjusting itself as it
they were probably that was probably a link going there to some of the things that evolved later.
Right.
I mean, you know, people say, you know, well, how do you distinguish between jazz and rock? Well, the music evolved from the other. I mean, it was swing. I mean, rock came out of jazz. It came out of rhythm and blues. I remember in high school, my buddy and I would ride around late at night, you know, after a game or something, and head to the diner, and on the radio in the car we used to listen to rhythm and blues. This was in the early 50s, or mid 50s.
Yeah.
And then rhythm and blues and all that became soul. I mean, all these handles that get put on, but there is an evolution. And how far you want to push it. Watching MTV, I was watching it last night, you know, and it's some of that stuff is pretty scary. Where that has taken Marilyn Manson, you know, and a few other things. That has no connection with the music that I love, with music in general. Mm-hmm. You know, it's weird.
Yeah. Scary's a pretty good word.
Yeah, Marilyn Manson, I would say, is pretty scary.
So you got into the Condon, picked up that Condon mantle or whatever it was. Did you enjoy your stint as a club owner?
Oh yeah, it was fantastic. I mean, being in the center of my jazz world, where playing, band leading, managing, and owning a club that represented everything I wanted to say. We didn't have a cover charge. Never had a music charge, because when I grew up and came to New York, I was able to go into jazz clubs and plunk myself down at the Metropole, order one beer, and sit for 3 hours and listen to the greatest music possible. So in the face of all these stiff music charges that have been put on all the clubs in New York to, quote, pay for the music, it's made it become more elitist, so that the average person can't come in and listen to and be influenced by the music. So we presented a club there. Up to the end, we charged any musician who could prove he was a musician. If we didn't know him and he had a union card, he could sit at the bar and drink for $1.25 a drink. And we finally upped it to $1.50. But some of the guys would come in and order a double Remy Martin, you know, and there it is, you got it, baby, for $1.50. But musicians came into the club. I mean, there were nights where half of the Count Basie band was in there. They'd finished the concert elsewhere. They'd come in. Joe Williams would come in and sing with us. He'd come in, and the minute he'd come in, we'd go into Rosetta, you know, and he'd come walking up from the bar and say, Frank Sinatra. All kinds of people came into that club. It was an exciting place to be for 10 years. At the end, for me, it was the administrative part of it and the drudgery of, you know, taking inventory of liquor and all that and food and closing up night after night and things. It was physically taxing.
Yeah.
It was a glorious 10 years, though, in New York. People would come from all over the world to Eddie Condon's.
Wow.
If it wasn't the premier club, it was one of 3 worldwide premier jazz clubs. It wasn't any great lavish place. It was just a jazz joint. It was a saloon, as you know, which is what Condon called his place. It was a saloon.
Right.
We served food, decent, minimal amount of food, but it was there. You come in. Our philosophy was you didn't have to have a cover charge. If you liked it, you'd stay and you'd order another drink. And by the time you're through, you'd probably spend the same amount of money that you'd spend. You know, you didn't have to make a commitment.
Right.
We advertised in all the local hotels. Music right around the corner. There was no fear of having to get in a cab, walk around New York. They could walk 2 blocks and come to Eddie Condon's, walk back to their hotel. So we had a worldwide, we had our own World Wide Web right there at Eddie Condon's. It was great. It was glorious.
What's your take on Eddie Condon as how he fits into the history of jazz? What was his major contribution?
He was a great band leader. He surrounded himself with great musicians. I don't think he gave it that much thought, but he actually was in the vanguard of breaking down racial barriers. He at the same time that Benny Goodman was putting on his 1938 concert, which had blacks and whites in the same band, Condon had his town hall concerts where he was doing the same thing. I think he just believed if you could play, you could play. No, don't worry about your sex. Don't worry about your color. I think he had it, you know, and nobody really is aware of the strong role he had at the time. I mean, he was you know, his personal life was kind of funny shambles. I mean, it was a sad, bittersweet because he drank an awful lot, but he loved to party. But he attracted to his club some of the world's, I mean, the great people of the world would come. The sports. They even, some of them came into us, the carryover, the Condons that we ran. Walter Cronkite, I mean, he was a jazz fan. He loved Wild Bill Davison. I still correspond with him.
Yeah.
Condon was a very key person. I mean, he grew up, he was born in Indiana and was in with those guys in Chicago before coming to New York. So he was in when swing was evolving, you know, and he hated the word Dixieland. I mean, don't ever mention Dixieland to Eddie Condon. We're just playing music. In fact, one of his books is called We Called It Music. Yep. So he was quite a man. And he knew good jazz. He knew it, too. I mean, he wouldn't tolerate mediocrity.
And who was in your house band while you were there?
Well, the first house band involved most of the time, Jim Andrews was our piano player, and Red Balaban was the bass player. We went through several different drummers, Ronnie Cole, Connie Kay from the MJQ was our drummer for about 3 years, believe it or not. Wow. Played great drums in our style. Danny D'Imperio, a great drummer from upstate New York, came in and did the last 3 years. I was the cornetist the whole time, the basic one. For a long period, most of the time was Vic Dickenson on trombone until he got, you know, feeble or sick, you know, around 2 years before the club closed. Tom Arton, a Princetonian friend of mine who I've played with since 1955. He came in and replaced Vic. In fact, Tom Martin is, in my estimation, one of the better trombone players in the country, and not too many people know him. Went through several very good piano players. Herb Hall was the original one, Edmund Hall's brother. He was there for 3 years with us. He was our original clarinetist. And we had Bobby Gordon, a very fine, I would say, Joe Marsala type, Pee Wee Russell influenced clarinetist, a real musician's musician. He now plays in San Diego, California. And we finished with Jack Mayhew, who came from who was, I guess, one of the co-leaders of the Salt City Six from Rochester area, or Syracuse, yeah. Rochester. So he was a clarinetist for the last 3 years or so. So and we had an agreement with anybody in the band that if you could get another gig elsewhere, a high-paying gig, or you wanted a night off, just call me and I would get a replacement. So it was almost very seldom that for 2 nights in a row we'd have exactly the same band, which kept the music kind of alive, and not, you don't get so used to playing with the same guys night after night, and each night could become a little different. Just you change 1 out of 6 and the whole chemistry can change. Yeah.
And you would just go up, would you go up on the stand and call the tunes as you felt?
That's right.
Playing to the crowd somewhat. And
we ended up, Red Balaban led the band pretty much 3 nights, and I led it 3. Most of the time early on, he led it 5 or 6 nights, and it evolved that I would have the band on Monday nights. I tried changing it a little bit on Monday nights, and toward the end, and had a few modern players. Lou Tabakin, I remember him working with him one night. Effie Resnick, who had gotten quite modern on trombone. I was trying to present a little bit of a more modern flavor, but that was just my indulging myself. But it was, we just go up on the stand and not give it that much thought. I'd look down at the song, let's say, hey, we'll do this one now. Or if we had requests, we'd play the requests. It was about as loose as it could get. The music spoke for itself, really.
Right. Your own personal tastes in of trumpet players, you're influenced by, you mentioned a couple guys, Bobby Hackett, and who was the other earlier?
Well, first off, there's Louis Armstrong.
Yeah, okay, well that's what I was going to ask
about. The shake or the wobble that I have as a part of my style was really out of Louis. From listening to Louis. And the melodic part, I think, is a combination of me playing the xylophone and seeing those chords, da-da-da-da, and listening to Hackett and his weaving notes. So I think that's part of my playing, is that. The intensity of certain players, Muggsy Spanier, and the beautiful intensity of Ruby Braff. Those are probably the strongest influences on me. I don't listen that much anymore. I feel like, to the older style. I'll listen to world music or classical music now as opposed to listening to jazz players. I'm not interested in going into the modern field. I'm too far along the way right now to really mess around. And I've had a good success, with my style. I like my style. So I don't listen too much now to other players.
It's an important statement. I like my style. You just said.
Well, I've done a lot of listening. It isn't a case of you're saying, well, this is me. I'm a natural born. I come with this style, and you know. So I've done a lot of listening, and I actually occasionally listen to what's being played today, and I just, it's lovely, but it's not me. So I feel very comfortable where I'm at.
Earlier on, you had made a statement about when you were talking about the xylophone. When people ask, what are you thinking about when you improvise? And you say, not much. We talk about that for a moment. Because I agree with your statement about how helpful it is to be able to see the chords, whether it's your xylophone.
It works
or
in your
piano.
subconscious someplace. I don't know. What do I think about?
Yeah.
Well, first, one of the things I like most about classic jazz, which is a nice all-around handle that I can put on a whole, my spectrum, let's say, of jazz, is collective improvisation, which has gone down the boards, down the tubes to a large degree in recent years. It's been much more prevalent solo playing. You get a lot of younger players, and they don't even get into this thing of listening to the other horns. I mean, I find myself in situations where the trombonist or the clarinetist or the saxophone are really playing solos even while you're playing an ensemble chorus. I think what I want to say is what goes through my mind is I do feel the interaction of the other players, and I love the interaction with other horn players. But in order to do that, you've got to leave spaces and listen to what the other guy is doing. It's almost like playing a duet or a trio. It's one of the beauties of of collective improvisation. So what is going through my mind is I am listening to the other players, and I'm saying, oh, now the rhythm section just decided to give me a Charleston beat. Okay, I'm going to shift my gears and do this. I'm going to lay a few notes down. I want to hear what the clarinet or the sax is going to give me back. This is during the ensemble part of the playing, and there are very few players who really are tuned into ensemble playing. Ken Poplawski's marvelous. He believes in leaving a lot of space. The space is important in ensemble playing. Tom Artin is wonderful with his putting the bottom in. He knows when to go up to the upper range on the trombone. Some of it's familiarity from working together in that case, but still, I love the collective thing. And when I'm playing a solo, I don't know what I'm thinking of. I might have had some classical music in the back of my head that I listened to that earlier that day, some beautiful melody. I try to create in my solos some kind of continuity. I don't think consciously of leading the audience into my solos, but I think that's the bottom line. I've had several people say, we love how you're weaving in your solos. We can follow you. And maybe in a way I've kept it simpler. I've kept my style simpler rather than fast, rapid technique. I choose to play a simpler.
Do you think about the, quote, safe notes in each chord as they go by, or is that more inherent by now?
I think by the time if you played as long as I have, you know whether your chops are in good shape, for instance, on a given night. You know whether that band is swinging. If that band is swinging and your chops are in pretty good shape, I'll try for anything that I'll try, and I'm not worried about making a mistake. I've got enough confidence that what's the worst going to happen? I'm going to get fired. My reputation's going to go down the tubes because of one mistake or something. I'm not worried about it. I'd rather make it exciting. Even in a recording studio, I've seen some guys clutch up the minute. I know that they can really play hot. You put them on a record date, and in a recording studio, everything is safe. And I say afterwards, that isn't you, man. You're playing. So don't worry, make a mistake. If worst comes to worst, we'll run it again. Now you can edit in the note, edit out the note.
Right.
But give me your best. I think that I probably just strength-wise. I probably peaked maybe 5 or 6 years ago as far as high notes and things like that. So I think, and also I think I play a little bit more simply. Maybe this is aging, maturity. They call it what you want. I choose my notes, but it's a matter of choice. I don't think I've listened to myself when I thought I was great playing very intense stuff, and I haven't liked it as well as I thought I did when I was playing it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So I'm a firm believer in simplicity. Vic Dickenson was the master of that, and I played next to him for 8 of the 10 years we were at Condon's, just a master of simplicity, and he had marvelous technique, but he would just lay it out there, those beautiful melodies. So I love that. When
players in the 60s came along, Coltrane and Miles Davis, and the music seemed to get, some of it, pretty angry. Was it something you listened to that had any effect on you? I just walked away from, I was not that interested. Some of the beautiful Miles Davis, with, the beautiful things, I loved it.
the other agendas that go with the playing, the attitudes and things, I try not to let that get in the way of my playing. I think by that time I already had decided on kind of where I was going to go musically and didn't want to get into a lot of that thing. I felt it would mess my style. Of course, I was working in the 60s. I was still working days. I hadn't made my commitment to go full time.
Yeah.
And it was very shaky to get into music. It was precarious. It was kind of dangerous to consider being a full-time musician. And hearing how great these guys were, they weren't all that successful financially, so I didn't go that route. When the time came, remember, it was Benny Goodman called me to play with him. Red Balaban, who played in the Condon tradition, was going to open a nightclub. He hired me to book his band, so I was very secure in the swing idiom, and it's almost like I didn't want to go down that road, and the angriness that has taken hold in much of music, in much of jazz, in much of the music of today. I don't want any part of it. I have no, when I came to New York in 1958 after college, I mean, yes, if I were a black at that time, I probably would not be telling you the same thing I'd be telling you now. But for me, a white, I was welcomed. I mean, I would see Al Casey up in St. Nicholas Avenue. I'd hire him on a job and take him and wait while he brought his guitar up and came back for his amp. I dated my wife in Harlem. We went to the Baby Grand. I was welcomed into the jazz community, and there weren't a lot of agendas going on at the time. Jazz was not black. Jazz was for everybody. Now it's very polarized with what's going on. So I don't buy into all that anger, and jazz is European. I mean, jazz, granted, it started in the States, but you go to Europe and you got some pretty fine players over there. Jazz is music. Music is for everybody, and it's not our music. Anger, the angriness never. I just walked away from it. I'm going through life once. I want to have fun.
Yeah.
I want. What other job can you think of where you go to work and everybody wants to have a good time?
Yeah.
I mean, how many people go to an office and it's nothing but aggravation? I go to a job and people really want to have a great time. So let's have a great time together. Yeah. I do believe. I don't believe in goofing off or hacking around with. I mean, I'm very. I set pretty high professional standards for myself and the fellows around me, but that means let's have a good time but play some darn good music.
Yeah. Is it a form of art for you?
Pardon?
Is it a form of art for you?
Oh, jazz itself is a cause célèbre. It is an art,
yeah.
And it's my motivation. It's the reason I am on the face of the earth, is to play good jazz music and keep doing all the things that I'm doing, promoting other players, promoting concerts, working for I don't anymore, but International Art of Jazz, doing stuff in schools, doing stuff in the public, carrying on the magic of Swing Street out in Boise, Idaho, and Cutbank, Shelby, Montana, where Cutbank, Shelby is one of the great Duke Ellington fans. A lady, a Native American up there, she's about in her 80s. Duke Ellington stayed at her house. She came on a bandstand and requested us to do some esoteric, some lesser known Duke Ellington piece. We couldn't play it. She got up and played it. I mean, these are the things. These are the things that count. I mean, go out there and bring this music to people. This is me. I believe in this music. If you like it, wonderful. I welcome into my world.
Yeah.
So
nice.
So it's a cause. Yeah, it's a cause. I don't want to. This is how I motivate myself. I don't go out in public and say, "You've got to believe," but hey, let's have some fun. Let's take our walk down Swing Street. Now, here's a tune that they did back then, but we love it doing it today.
Right. This concept of the magic of Swing Street. When did it kind of come together for you? Well,
Columbia artists came to a concert I did in 1992 up at the Emlyn Theater in Westchester. I invited them because I know that they have probably 500 or 600 venues throughout the United States. It's an organization called Community Concerts, and what they what they do is, it started out as a classical, Columbia Records or Columbia Recordings started it many years ago, 75, 80 years ago, as an outlet for their artists. And what they did was, a small community would get up a budget, let's say, of $30,000, okay. Community concerts would go out and say, well, we can bring you the Kirov Ballet, we can bring you Ed Polcer and his jazz band, we can bring you a concert pianist, we can bring you a circus act, and that'll all fit your budget. So that year in Cutbank, Shelby, Montana, you can have some of the greatest entertainment in the world, and all it's going to cost you as a person is maybe $20 for the whole concert series, okay? So they get this budget going. And so I knew about Columbia artists, but I felt that I just didn't want to have just a jazz concert. I felt that it was a perfect opportunity of bringing, in an entertaining way, the music. In other words, a little story that went along. So effectively, it's like a mini show, but it's basically a jazz concert. Instead of just getting up there and playing and nobody understanding what you're doing. So I started with a night at Eddie Condon's, and that we toured for 2 years with that. And we must have hit 80, 120 different concerts just doing that. And I went to the people at Columbia Columbia Artists, and said, I'd like another go-around, and I have a great idea for another show that we could do. And I said, and they came up with the title, The Magic of Swing Street. I said, you know, we could show going beyond what it was. Night at Eddie Condon's described what went on at Eddie Condon's, and it showed the influences of all the influences coming from all the country to come into that Chicago-style playing that we had, you know, whether it was Benny Moten. And anyway, it looked at jazz from the influences on the music that was played at Eddie Condon. So this other was, hey, here's this, come and take us walk with us down New York Swing Street. There was only one time in the history of the world where all the forms of classic jazz was played. This is my opening line. It was New York's 52nd Street, Swing Street, for 20 years, from 1935 through 1955. What was played there? Traditional, Dixieland, ragtime, New Orleans, blues, Chicago style, mainstream, bebop, where it was like an artist colony for musicians, and it really must have been. I only caught the tail end of it, but I mean, to walk down that street, there were 40 jazz clubs in 2 city blocks, and for 20 years, music poured forth on the street, and musicians could learn from each other. The style of swing reached its maturity there. The traditionalists could hear the swing players, they could hear the bebop players, they could feed off one another. And it was just a wonderful time to be. And then when you get into some of the songs that came out of that time, I mean, some people in the audience, I mean, would be in tears. You know, it encompassed World War II, for crying out loud, where you had some of the prettiest and saddest love songs ever written. And the jazz bands were playing those too. And some of the people, you know, the more elderly ones in the audience would, you know, remember what it was like in the 40s. And whether they had been to New York or not, we were giving them a trip to New York here in your own armchair, in in Cutbank, Shelby, Montana. So that's, in a way, it's a hook, and it provided wonderful work for our bands and a wonderful chance. If Condon's closed in '85, they tore it down to make way for another office building. So that was motivated me to, if you can't come to my club to hear us, I'll try to bring it to you. And again, it goes beyond just a jazz concert. It's got a little story that goes with it. And people, even the jazz fans, I've done this at some of the jazz festivals, and in the face of, you know, just pretty, what should I say, laid-back jazz musician, I decided I was not going to worry about, I'd have the courage of my convictions, and I'd go and say, look, can I do a set of The Magic of Swing Street at one of these jazz festivals? They say, yeah, why don't you? So I do my hour set, and people would come up afterwards, even the hardcore jazz fans. That was great. I didn't know that. You said this story here. That was a great story. I didn't know that about the Count Basie and the air conditioner at the, you know, how he became famous, because they decided if they booked a Basie band, they put in air conditioning. You know, things like this. So it brings it down on a personal level. It makes the audience feel that they're part. It breaks down the wall between the player and the audience. Which
was the way the music was supposed to be.
Which I believe the music that I believe in was. You know, whether some music works better with, you're in awe of that great performer, but I think even the great ones, Andre Watts is a wonderful, he knows classical music. He knows why he's going to pick a program and do this tune and do this one. This one led from here to here. All of a sudden, the audience can share so much more with you. So that's where the magic of Swing Street came in the face of whether, I just decided I was going to do it. And everybody has fun doing it. And it provides a lot of work for guys.
What's your association been with, or experience in trying to get your music recorded? Has it been looking...
Not very good. Concord never was interested. I mean, the fellow, I forget his name, he used to come into Condon's all the time.
Jefferson?
Yeah, he came in there a couple of times, and I figured he would ask me to record for him, and never did. And that probably was it didn't leave me feeling too good about it. The one who has recorded what I've done, again, is a traditional jazzology, George Buck in New Orleans, but that was through the help of Phil Carroll, who runs the Atlanta Jazz Party. He knew that I had not been recorded that much, and so what he did was set up a recording session after actually after 4 or 5 of the Atlanta Jazz Festivals, and through the auspices of Jazzology out of New Orleans, they've recorded me. That's mail order. And the other two, I've promoted myself for these concert tours. A Night at Eddie Condon's, The Magic of Swing Street. I've been on two of the tours of Europe in Germany, and every year the Nagelheier in Hamburg records whoever's touring for Manny Selcho. And I went over and led a tribute to Eddie Condon.
Is that what this came from?
Yeah, that's the Nagelheier. And I also last year went over with Terry Blaine, a very fine straight-ahead vocalist, and with her Too Hot for Words, the Great Ladies of Swing concert. We toured all over, and they recorded us there on that. But that was Terry Blaine and Mark Shane. It's not easy to get recorded playing the style I am.
When you go to the jazz parties these days, there's so much product out there, the CDs and so forth. I'm wondering, it must be hard to sell enough to really get any return on it.
Yeah, it's if you're going to produce them yourself. Actually, you can produce them pretty inexpensively. I mean, let's face it. I mean, if you do, even by musician's scale, if you say for 20 minutes of recorded time you need 3-hour session, for about $1,000 a player you can turn out a CD. Unless you really want to nitpick and really have absolute perfection in arrangements. But if you're doing the kind of music I like, it's pretty freewheeling. And if you've got a take, you just roll. You go on to the next tune, you roll. If there's a clinker in there, so what? It's jazz. So therefore, as a leader with 5 guys, it costs you $5,000 for the musicians. You've probably done the session in 6 hours. So that's 6 hours of studio time. That's $75 an hour. That's $450 of studio time. The mixing, maybe another 4 hours, 5 hours. CDs cost you about $1 a piece for the CD. With the case and with the artwork, you should not have to cost you more than about $2 a CD. So once you've absorbed the let's say $2,000 of studio time in musicians, it's three. If you buy 1,000 CDs, the CDs are going to cost you $2 a piece, and you're going to have $3 a piece is going to be your cost. So your first 1,000, your cost of your CD is about $5 a piece, and you sell them for $15 or $20. It's the only way to do it. I mean, but you need an outlet. And yes, at the jazz festivals, you're competing with so many of the other players at jazz parties. There's so many CDs out there, you're not going to do it. But if you've got any number of concert gigs, you can, so you sell 1,000 a year. That's 15 grand, right? And that's only 1,000 a year, and then
Right.
But if you another thing, and I've compared my notes with other players, is that if you see an audience of people who really are really liking what you're doing, if there's 1,000 people in the audience, you will average $1,000 in sales. So for that
Oh.
for that concert, as long as it's your CD that's out
Right.
there.
Right.
So what you're saying is a little under 10% of the people will buy a CD, and it averages out.
Yeah.
Every once in a while you'll get double that, and other ones you really bomb out. But so having those concerts for Columbia artists was financially was great with the CDs.
You enjoy playing these jazz parties?
Yes.
Invite all the different musicians?
Yeah, I like it when they, I like the jazz parties as opposed to the jazz festivals where they have organized bands. Yes, the parties are wonderful where they invite anywhere from 15 to 30 musicians, 3 or 4 on each instrument, and they put you together in different combinations. Some of them are good, some of them are not so good. Depends on the attitude of the players that go to some of them. Some are very and don't want to budge too much, and therefore the repertoire ends up being more limited than it could be. In other words, it'll come down to maybe one of 200 tunes, let's say, that everybody knows. You know, and you get tired of playing Undecided and Jumping at the Woodside and a few of the other tunes, you know, and 1 O'Clock Jump, or you know, Don't Get Around Much Anymore, or Satin Doll. I mean, they're all great tunes, but you get there and you got 6 guys. Okay, now what are we going to do, guys? You know, if the leader on a given set really puts in some time ahead of time and says, okay, I got a great swing set here, or I have a very traditional set, let's do a traditional set. And so it depends how much time you put in on it. And some guys don't, some of the players just go and, you know, and they're kind of lackadaisical about it. So some of the festivals are good, some of them aren't. It's not all wonderful. I mean, you know.
How about playing overseas in Europe?
Very appreciative audiences. Yeah. I tried living in Paris for 6 months, and living there on European musicians' terms is not economically very good. This was a while ago when I lived, and this was 1963. And I mean, I was working for $8 a night and $15 a night. I tried living in Paris for 6 months and traveling around Europe. But going over there as an American with pre-booked gigs, you're getting the best of everything. You know, you're treated nicely, and the audiences really do love you. Japan the same way. But I've had a good run here in the States. I mean, because of the narrative and because of being friendly with the audiences. I mean, I think every audience I play for, I have a good time, and I think they do.
Well, there's a lot to be said for putting giving the audience some credit and wanting to include them in what you're doing. And I mean, jazz musicians considered themselves entertainers, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, you see what the Ellington band wore and the way that the sections would move. It was good enough for them. It's good enough for me. I mean, what's this stand up here and be a hero baloney? You know, let's have some fun. Let's get into it.
Yeah. Have you had much occasion to visit colleges, work with college-age students?
Not much.
No.
I just put an ad in Jazz Times that now available. One of the masters of the jazz cornet, Ed Polcer, would like to take you on a stroll down Swing Street and perhaps conduct a seminar. Also, if you want, involving the business side of music, you know, things we're talking about today.
Right.
I mean, I think it could be great for some of the young people. I think it's a facet of it that they don't get.
Yeah.
I think if you get clinicians, a lot of musicians are wonderful technicians. I don't think they can deal with the business side or the history of it that say I could do. Yeah. I could, you know, present some things for kids to think about. And, you know, the fact that I spend 8 hours a day or 6 hours a day on the phone and doing paperwork and following up and organizing bands and making those cold calls. Hey, would you like to book my band? I'm trying to do stuff with symphony now. I've got eight arrangements for jazz band and symphony. We did 2 symphony concerts last year. A whole new market for new audiences. But try and buck the symphony.
Wow.
They don't want you to. They don't want to do pops concerts for starters. Most of the symphonies, they feel it's a necessary evil. For them, it's like putting on a red vest and playing, you know, Dixieland jazz for a picnic. I mean, for them, playing a pops concert. So trying to make that sale. But when you talk to kids, you know, it's not just the playing. There's an awful lot of administrative work that goes into this thing.
Yeah.
And you got to be prepared. And you better have some business courses too. Don't if you're going to major in music, take some business courses. It doesn't have to be the business of music, but you know,
Just general. Knowing.
just knowing business,
Yeah.
knowing and getting to like people, the whole thing.
Mm. Speaking of liking people, did you enjoy your stint with Benny Goodman?
Yes.
Yeah.
I had, well, I mean, we were treated like kings by the audiences.
Oh.
I mean, the thrill of my opening night, 18,000 people. I mean, I was shaking so much that, you know, we played Let's Dance, and I mean, da, 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 da. I mean, literally, I couldn't stop shaking. And I had nothing but good experiences with Benny, and myself. He always was very supportive of me, and what I liked in his later years, which is what I was a part of, was that he liked surrounding himself with younger players. It made him feel, I think, more vital, and it also provided an awful lot of us, and here and forevermore, I include in my bio that I played with Benny Goodman, and you know, and it's a mark of credibility, you know, your credentials, you know, so it was a great experience. The first time that I really got treated like most musicians should be treated all the time, you know, as a celebrity. It was great.
There's sure a lot of places in the country now that you can go to study jazz.
Yes.
Do you feel that there needs to be more emphasis on the audience, potential audience for jazz? Maybe I'm spouting my own feelings here.
Well, let me say this. My son is just decided to major in jazz performance at the University of Michigan. And he already knows the business side from watching me in action. And already I'm feeling that he could there should be more given to him other than just the pure music part of it. You know, is that what you're kind of saying? I mean, all the business side of it, the personality, all this kind of stuff. I mean, it was a great article. Winton, who I disagree with on a lot of points, wrote this great article. It was in Jazz Times about what is some of the things that are lacking in teaching at college level, and it has to do with performance and liking the audience and everything else. I mean, I'll send it to you.
Read it.
Maybe I didn't hear your question.
Well, I guess I look at all the players coming out of the jazz programs, and many of them are really, really good.
Yes.
I'm wondering where they're going to go with it if there's no audience for it. Is there something we could do? And I guess what you're doing here with the Swing Street.
I don't, you know, I think a lot of the teachers don't really are that fully aware of what the world is like out there as a jazz musician. I mean, the communication part of it, having to sell your product. Technique is not the only answer. I have to be careful because I don't know enough about what is being taught. Really, I do know it's kind of simplistic to say that you're turning out great great technicians, but I don't think enough time is spent on collective improvisation, small band work. The real world, let's face it, is not going to be a big band reading right. Those parts. And I do not like a lot of the solos put out by great technicians. I just feel that they've learned things almost by rote, by too much Arbonne book and not enough simple stuff. All the things I've been talking about, my whole philosophy, I think a lot of it is lacking in the music schools. We didn't have that much in music schools when I was in, you know, we did it by playing. Of course, the jazz was the music of the time, you know, so. And I think these are substitutes now. You've got to create a lab band. You got to create a big band. You got to create you get take one course and they divide you up into 6 small group improvisation things, and you try and pick the best guys to work together, and the ones, you know, you're creating you have to create the situations that happened automatically when I was in school. I was fortunate enough to play every weekend at a party where people were loving it, you know, playing our music.
Yeah.
I think it's coming back with swing dancing. I think younger people are getting interested much more so. My son is out in Michigan, has already got 3 or 4 clubs in Ann Arbor where they have jazz. I stopped at one place, I saw him sit in one night. I mean, and he's just starting, and they encouraged him. So there are natural settings for this music, and I do think the involvement of young people in dancing can turn a corner, unless they just make it a fad and just say, this is retro.
Right.
You know, I mean, if the Squirrel Nut Zippers and their leader are what I read about him, he's genuine, and if they are not going to be a typical retro band, maybe they will set a standard. But I do see young people. I played a club in Westchester, a new jazz club, August Lounge. Out there were college-age kids learning how to, they call it swing dancing. It's jitterbugging, you know, I mean, tossing each over the shoulder, practicing right on the dance floor. Played a job at Columbia University. Boy, I'm talking too much here. Last year with a fraternity party where the kids were lined up. They were charging admission for kids from other fraternities to come for their annual swing dance. There must have been 300 people in this fraternity house on 110th Street in New York City, swing dancing. It was wonderful. So maybe, you know, maybe there will.
Yeah.
I don't know, I guess I hedged a little bit because I really can't, I don't want to start attacking what's going on in schools, but I do think if some of the things that I was talking about were covered, kids would, young people, I hate the word kids, young people would be aware of what the real world is. And and maybe the teachers some of them are not quite up to the task of, for instance, collective improvisation. If a teacher's tastes are bebop and a kid comes there with a more traditional thing, who's going to say what? You're improvising wrong? What are you going to do?
Right.
It was like before Little League Baseball. We went up and played baseball up in the hayfields in Prospect Park, New Jersey. That's where we learned as kids. It wasn't all so organized. So maybe with the swing dance thing, there'll be informal groups forming on campuses. Mm-hmm. That's the way it was in the 50s. Every college campus in the Eastern Seaboard had 2 or 3 jazz bands. Some of them were swing, some of them were bebop, some of them were Dixieland. With Colgate Winter Carnival, they'd have a full day Saturday from 10 in the morning to 5 at night, 5 in the evening. One jazz band after another, a solid day of jazz in the auditorium there. All informal groups, nothing, no auspices. Colleges have had to do it this other way because it's not been, jazz has not been central to the peers haven't been that interested in it.
Yeah.
So a kid is going to gravitate to play rock or whatever.
Right. Well, you're doing your part.
Well, and a lot of the players I work with are too. So.
Yeah. You want to just show me your weapon of choice there?
It's a fairly beat-up second-hand cornet, it's a Yamaha, and it just has a nice big sound. Again, I haven't bought a new horn probably since college, and so I'll just play a horn and just like it. So,
Learn to like it.
learn to like it.
Yeah.
But it has the sound. Oh, that's another thing I think. I don't know whether they're saying it, but when a player enters jazz, he starts with sound. And the sound that he has, or she, or the sound that you develop, and your improvising should, I think, have some kind of connection with that. If you have a big, fat sound, you'd be hard-pressed playing a subtle bebop phrase. And if you have if your body and your horn is giving you a thin sound, you're not going to sound like Louis Armstrong. Mm-hmm. You're going to overblow that horn. So you start with whatever your sound is. That's it.
Yeah. I love what the mutes can do for your instrument. You mind showing me a little bit of that?
What, would you like to hear what the different...
I'd like to hear what they do.
Well, the mutes, okay. I love working with mutes because it can change the texture of what you're playing. I mean, here, open horn. Can you make it ring, right? Okay. Mm-hmm. So then you take a Harmon mute, and you take the stem out, and you go close to the microphone and you approximate what Miles. Or you can put the stem in, and you can sound like some of the Duke Ellington trumpet sections. Really an intense black Harlem feel. The wah-wah, okay?
Yeah.
And then you have the good old plunger, which of course, again, is more traditional. Muggsy Spanier. You can get that feel too, but,
Yeah.
but all you're doing is altering the flow of air there.
Available at your local hardware store,
Okay, right. And this is a Dennis Wick, a British manufacturer. It's a plastic mute. It's very versatile, and it can become a cup mute. Which blends very well with a nice soft sax. Or if you want an intensity for duets with a clarinet. And I'm talking about the timbre of the,
Yeah.
okay, now if I get in a hot duet with somebody playing China Boy with it, or like on the clarinet, I'm not going to overblow the clarinet.
Uh-huh.
Or
I
if
love that cup mute. It has such a sound
Oh yeah,
reminiscent
it's beautiful.
of the, I don't know, it speaks of a certain era.
Yeah.
Almost.
Oh, it's mellow. It's very.
Yeah.
All right. So
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
but you know, and it's very, very, very intimate for ballad playing. So,
Great.
so here I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different combinations depending on what I want to make
Right.
that song do.
I'm jealous as a saxophone player, you know.
So anyway,
Yeah. Well, thanks for the demonstration.
yeah, okay.
What's up for you in the near future?
Well, next
Okay,
week I
please.
go to 3 concerts in Raleigh, North Carolina, in that area, and 2 weeks later out in Seattle, Washington for 2 more. I have a very interesting concert on January 1st at the Museum of Modern Art in New York as a part, in connection with the Jackson Pollock art exhibit that opens, I think, tomorrow, in the 1st of November. And Jackson Pollock was a jazz fan, and so they're doing four Fridays in January. We're doing it January 1st. The music that Jackson Pollock liked. And evidently, he loved jazz and liked playing along while he painted. So whatever his bizarre paintings were, you can blame jazz. No. But anyway, we're doing it.
Titled as
we're-
Improvisation.
Right, we're doing a thing called the Night at Nick's, which was the club that predated Condon's with that great New York style jazz, and a lot of his. It's all based on his record, Jackson Pollock's record collection. And I'm still working on. I've got about 8 or 9 jazz festivals already booked, or jazz parties for next year. I'm still trying hard to book us the Magic of Swing Street with symphony orchestras for Pop's concerts. We have that. And continuing on what we've been doing.
Good. Well, you can't sit still. That's
No,
for sure.
no. There's no way. No way. I mean, I've had great role models in my life. Milt Hinton being one, Clark
Yes.
Terry being another. I shouldn't even start naming names.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of good role models that, man, if you've been given this gift of being able to play and you like people, what better? You take a couple of $1 million, and maybe not even that, to make me stop doing what I'm doing.
Uh-huh.
It's a great way.
Well, I've enjoyed talking to you.
Likewise, I'm a little bit hoarse here.
Yeah, I know.
from
We
talking
fit
quite
a
bit.
lot in.
Yeah.
So best of luck. I'm sure we'll meet each
Well,
other.
good
down
luck
the
to you
road.
in this whole program. I'm really proud of you and what you're doing, what this whole program is, because it goes to the core of who I am too. So,
Good. Okay.
thank you. It's really great.